All right, well, it looks like I've got everything ready to go. So we'll get started here. I'm Chef Jeremy, friendly neighborhood kitchen man. We got a little change of scenery this week. I'm house sitting, so now we have a little more space to work with, which is good for me. Today we're gonna make some white bean chicken chili. So this is a super good, super healthy dish. There's not a whole lot that goes into it aside from some vegetables and beans and chicken, super high protein. So let's get started. What we're gonna need first of all is a big pot. You don't quite have to go this big, but this is all I could find in the house that I'm in. So this will work. We'll just get the heat started off at like a nice medium level. We'll hit the bottom with just a splash of oil, probably like a couple teaspoons just to get the bottom nice and lubed up. Kind of swish it around a little bit. All right, so we'll start cutting with our onion. Real quick, I'll go through everything we're gonna need in case you don't have the recipe in front of you. So an onion, we're gonna do some peppers. I went with a green bell pepper and we'll do a little poblano just for a little bit of heat. They're not gonna be too spicy, but they'll just give it a little zip at the end. Then we're gonna do some fresh corn. If you want to use frozen corn, that's also acceptable, but they had fresh corn, so why not? We'll shuck some of that. We'll need a couple of limes, some cilantro, just a big bunch. And then we've got some white beans. These are great northern beans. Any white bean will work. We're gonna set aside a cup of the beans separately, and then we'll keep the rest of them here whole. This little cup, we're gonna mash them up. And then we'll just have our little bowl of spices. There's cumin, oregano, chili powder, cayenne, and a little bit of salt. Then we have some chicken stock, of course, some chicken breasts, and a little bit of Greek yogurt. So we'll get started here with our onion. We're just going to cut both ends off. This one's a little bigger than I expected. So I'm doing about a 1.5 batch today of what the recipe would call for, just because my ingredients came a little bigger than expected. And I'm going to make some of these for some friends of mine. So we'll get those ends cut off, get those peels removed. What I should do is have myself a little garbage here. We'll just do this. Get a little leftover grocery bag to throw all our odds and ends into. So with our onion, we're just going to dice it into medium or small chunks, entirely up to you how you want them. This is going to be more of like a chili stew, so we don't really want to go with big slices or big chunks, just kind of little smaller pieces that'll blend in. I'm going about a 1/4 inch on my dices. Do the same thing with the other half. And if your onions are too big, you can always cut it in half and then save the other half for something else. Or you can just beef up your recipe a little bit. I think onions are a good space filler anyway, so we'll just go ahead and use all of them. So my pot should be nice and warm by now. The oil's kind of moving around almost like water. That's what we're looking for. So we'll throw those in. We got a nice gentle little sizzle going on. Let's get those skins out of there. And we'll just kind of stir that around, get the oil on them. Start sweating them down. Maybe turn the heat up just a little bit. I'm not used to a gas range. I guess I am in the kitchen, restaurant kitchen, but at home I have the old electric. Oh, we'll do the peppers first. So we'll take our green pepper, just chop the top off of there. And then we're going to pull out the inside here, get all those seeds out of there and all that little white pith that's just hanging onto the sides, just kind of pluck it all off. So we just have a nice hollow pepper. I'm going to cut it in half, and then we're going to do the same thing, just cut this into dices. However you want to do it, doesn't matter. You can go up and down or side to side. You just want to get these nice little strips. And then we're going to cut those as close to the size of the onions as we can get. Same thing with the other half here. Oh, we got a little bit of that white stuff hanging on. We'll just trim that off of there. Perfect. Same thing, give those a nice little dice. And since this is like a big soup chili thing, you don't really have to worry too much about like the size and shape of your stuff. You just don't want it too big, but it doesn't have to be perfect and uniform. That's kind of the fun of the soup, is just throwing it all in together and letting it cook together. Stir that up with those onions just to speed it up a little bit. I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit more, probably to like a medium high. And then we'll take our poblano. If you want to, you can wear gloves while you're doing this part if you don't want to get like a little bit of that stinginess on the end of your fingers, but poblanos aren't too terribly spicy. So we'll just do the same thing we did with our other pepper. And what I like to do is just hang it upside down and give it a couple pats, get all those extra seeds out of there. Then I like to stand it on the point and just cut straight down. Same thing, cut it into some strips. So if you're looking for a little more heat in your chili, you can go all the way up to like a jalapeno or something. If you want real hot, I mean, obviously you can get those exotic peppers like a habanero or something. But if you want like a nice mild or medium heat, you could also use like Anaheim peppers. Those are going to be like the lighter green, bigger ones. We'll just throw this in here. Poblanos are nice because they're kind of like a middle ground between jalapenos and green peppers. And I think they have a nice, good, dark color to them. Stir those up. Perfect. Then we're going to take our corn, which this still has the shuck on it. So we're going to shuck the corn real quick. And luckily they kind of pulled off a layer for us. It's hard to see, but we're just going to pull all those little hairs off. Pull that green skin out of there. If you do it just right, you can kind of get all those hairs on the first go, but there's always going to be a couple lingerers on there, which is no big deal. So what I like to do is start right at the top and kind of pull all the hairs off from the top and bunch them up, and they should come right off. There we go. And then you can kind of just brush it downwards to get those stragglers. Perfect. So then what we'll do with this is I'm going to cut off the bottom so it's nice and flat. Maybe. There we go. Same thing with the other one. And then we're going to stand it upright. Here too. And then you're going to kind of see where the corn touches the core there. And just go straight down and chop all that corn off of there. And you'll feel if you get a little bit of resistance, it means you're just getting kind of close to the core of it, so you can move out a little bit. But you want to try to get as much of that corn off of there as possible so you're not leaving behind all the good stuff. Like I said, if you're not comfortable doing this or you're just in a hurry, frozen corn will do just as well. But this will give it that nice sweet crunch. It'll have that little fresh flavor and texture that you won't necessarily get from like frozen corn. And this is also going to make a little bit of a mess just because they like to jump off of there when they fall. Perfect. So you should have a nice little empty core here. Then kind of gather up your jumpers. And you can kind of leave them in these little, they might fall off in like little bunches, which is perfectly fine. Once you throw them in the pot, they're going to break up a little bit. So let's do this. We'll just move the corn to the side here. Right, and then we'll move on to our garlic cloves. I've got 4 little garlic cloves here. When it comes to using garlic, it's kind of up to you. I said 3 cloves, but I like a little more garlic in mine. And these are kind of small, so I'm going to do 4 of them instead. So I'm starting to get a good whiff of the peppers and onions. We're just going to keep kind of stirring that up a little bit. We just want them to get nice and soft. You don't want to burn them or anything. We're just kind of trying to cook all that extra moisture out and soften them up a little bit. So we'll take our little garlic cloves and we're just going to put them in a little pile and just start mincing them. Give them a good chop. Once they start running away a little bit, you can clean off your knife, kind of scoop them back into a little pile. And you don't have to go too small on it. You just want to kind of break up those bigger chunks of them. So we're going to throw that in with the corn. So we'll just pile it all up together. Get a little rinse on the garlic fingers here. All right. So our peppers are looking nice and almost translucent. I guess the onions, the way you can tell you're getting close is if your onions start to get a little more translucent, almost see-through. I guess not quite see-through, but you know what I mean. And they're starting to get soft and kind of clump up together, which is what we're looking for. So at this point, we can probably throw our corn and garlic in there. So we're just going to kind of scoop it up and plop that in there. And take your knife and kind of slide it up against the knife and get all that good stuff off the bottom. I always like to say, if you don't get messy or make a mess, you're not cooking right. There should always be something to clean up by the end of the day. And this corn is on every surface already. Oh, perfect. So at this point, we can turn the heat up a little bit just because we have so much stuff in the pan. We'll go up to like a medium high. And if you're patient or you're not in a hurry, you can definitely keep the heat lower. But just for the sake of making it a quick recipe, we'll turn the heat up and we'll just have to watch it a little more closely. But luckily there's so much moisture in here from all the vegetables that it's not quite going to burn. It'll just steam a lot quicker. So we'll let that go for about a minute or two. And then what we're going to do is get all of our spices together. So I've already gone ahead and done that, but you're going to take about a half teaspoon of each of them. And we're going to have cumin, cayenne, chili powder, oregano, and a little bit of salt in there as well. If you don't want it quite as spicy, you can leave out the cayenne if you want. And if you want it to be a little more flavorful, you can always throw in a little more seasoning. It's one of those things that's just kind of a taste thing. But I like to just mix them all together and shake them up. That way when I dump them in, I can just throw them all in at once. And they'll already be pre-mixed. It's looking pretty good. Turn it up a little more. There we go. Nice and hot. So what we're trying to do here is just kind of sweat that garlic down a little bit so it doesn't have that really intense garlicky bite to it. And we also want to cook that corn just a little bit. At this point, it's looking pretty good. So what we'll do is take our little dish of spices and we'll just dump that in there with them. Kind of try to coat everything a little bit so you don't have one big ball of seasoning on top. But then we're going to mix it around. And it's good to try, if you can, cooking your spices ahead of time, like at this point, when you have not a whole lot of moisture in there. You don't want to throw it in when you have like all your chicken stock and stuff already in there. What we want to do is kind of toast the seasonings a little bit just to bring out a little bit extra flavor. Kind of like the same thing we do with our vegetables. You want to cook them down a little bit and it kind of helps increase that flavor profile a little bit. So I always try to keep my spices nice and toasty before I add all the juice to it. And the other thing is you can give this a good whiff at this point. And if it's got a good like seasoning smell to it, then you know a little bit what it's going to taste like. When your nose gets as well trained as mine, I suppose, then you can think like, oh, I'm going to need a little more chili powder in there or a little more oregano, whatever it is. But I can kind of smell all those together, which is good. Almost smells like a taco seasoning. Turn that down just a little bit. Okay, and then while those are going, we've got our beans separated. So remember, I took 1 cup of beans. We'll do just a little more in there. It's not quite full. So I took out 1 cup of them, and then the rest of the 2 cans that we used are in this bowl. So we'll just dump it right in here. Those can cook with those. There we go. That's looking good. Just kind of stir those around a little bit. Now we're going to take that cup that we had earlier and throw it into the bowl where we had the rest of those beans. And you can just take like a fork or pretty much anything that'll fit into this bowl, and we're going to kind of mash them up a little bit into almost like a paste. And what it's going to do, it's going to help thicken a little bit, and it'll give it a little bit different texture to your chili, so it'll help it be less soupy and more like a stew or a chili. And you don't have to add like a bunch of flour and butter or cornstarch. Cornstarch is nice, but it kind of gives it a weird grainy texture. And I love a good roux, but flour and butter are 2 of those things if you're trying to eat healthy, you want to try to avoid. So just mashing up these beans is a good way to kind of simulate that while also using ingredients that you're already using. And while you're mashing, you can kind of feel what I'm talking about. It starts to get real thick and pasty. You don't have to mash them all the way. You just kind of want to get those big chunks of bean broken up. Stir it around a little bit because those big clumps will stick to the bottom. There we go. Perfect. So we should have a nice little bean paste. And you can feel how nice and thick it is. So we'll just add that to it as well. Try to get as much out of there as you can. All right, and then we're gonna get our chicken stock or chicken broth. If you want to get like unsalted, they make low sodium. I think this is the low sodium one, or maybe not. I think I got the regular one because it was the big one. But you can get low sodium or fat free or whatever it is you're looking for. the broths are usually pretty universal. You could even use vegetable broth if you wanted to. But we're gonna measure out about 3 cups of that. And so I've got 3 cups of my broth here. And I'm just gonna pour that right in there. And I like to get the big one. I usually get more than I need when it comes to the broth or the liquid part of it, because sometimes by the end of the process, you actually end up needing just a little bit more to go for whatever texture or soupiness level that you're looking for. And we're just going to kind of mix that up. We can even turn up the heat a little bit because we're going to try to boil it here. But you want to try to break up those big chunks of mashed beans just to kind of spread it throughout. And you can already kind of see when you're looking at it that it'll thicken up pretty quick. So we'll just have to keep an eye on it, because with it being a little bit thicker, it does have that chance to kind of burn to the bottom, especially with those beans in there. So you don't want to have it all the way high, but you want to have it high enough that it's going to boil. So probably a nice medium high. And while that's going, we're going to take our cilantro. And a lot of people will sit here and pluck all the individual leaves off of this, and it'll take forever. What I like to do is just, usually they have the little band on it. So I'll grab the band and then I'll grab the top and just twist. And then there go all your stems. And of course, you're going to have some bigger stems in here. So if you want to pick through, I just like to kind of lay it out flat. And then if I see any real big ones sitting in there, I'll just grab those out. But if you have, you know, some stems attached to your cilantro, that's no big deal. It's just going to be more flavor. So what I'll do is I'll bunch them back up, kind of into the same shape they were in that bunch. And then we'll just go down the line. Chop it as thin as we can. And it'll almost mince itself just like this. You don't have to sit there and chop it a big pile for 5 minutes trying to get all your leaves cut evenly. And then if you have some stragglers, I just go back the other way, kind of do like a checkerboard. Perfect. And there we have a nice minced cilantro, and we didn't have to spend 20 minutes plucking all the leaves off. So we'll gather all that up there. Perfect. Set that aside. So now that we're getting our soup to a nice almost boil here, what we're going to do is, there's a couple ways you can go about this, but for the sake of saving time, I bought the nice already thin cut chicken breast. Basically, there's just a whole breast cut in half down the width of it. And so if you want to, and you have the time, you can throw just a whole chicken breast into the pot and then cover it and just let it simmer for about 20 minutes or so. And then that will cook the chicken enough that you can just kind of shred it with a fork inside of the pot. What I'm going to do is just cut it into little cubes. Just put it right on top of this board. I'm going to grab a new cutting board just because I don't want to mess up my nice fresh stuff cutting board. I'll lay these out. And then you don't have to worry about washing your knife before you cut chicken. You just want to wash it afterwards. So got a little cilantro on there. It's not going to hurt. It's all going together. So we're just going to cut these into strips. You don't want them too big, but you don't want them too small. We'll do that with all 3 of these halves here. This is a little over a pound of chicken, which is good for me because I'm making just a little more chili. But then we'll take these strips and just kind of line them up the other way, and we're going to cut them into little chunks, little cubes. And at this point, my chili is nice and boiling, which is what we're going for. So then we're going to take this chicken and just throw it right into the pot and let that hot boiling water, I guess, stock, cook it all up. We'll cut up the rest of this one here. All right. So now that we've cut our chicken, we're definitely going to want to have to clean up all this stuff, wash our hands and everything, but that's why I like to do it at the end. I don't have to cut my chicken, then wash, and then start cutting all the vegetables. All right, get a good scrub on those hands, get all that chicken juice off of there. Now we're gonna stir this up a little bit, just kind of spread that chicken throughout there. And at this point, we're gonna have a lot of stuff in here. So this is where you can kind of judge if you want to add a little more stock, or if you just want to have like a real thick chili, you can stick with it like that. But since I've got a few more minutes of cooking left on this little bowl here, I'm going to throw in probably another cup or so of this stock. Perfect. All right, and once again, we're just going to let that come up to a boil again. A real light boil, we don't want it splashing all over the place, but just a nice simmer. And so now that we've kind of cubed up our chicken, it'll cook in probably the next 5 or 6 minutes, so we don't have to cook forever. But if you want to have that like shredded chicken kind of chili, and you throw in those whole breasts, you're going to want to let it simmer for about 20-25 minutes, depending on how thick they are. But another trick you can do is buy like one of those already cooked rotisserie chickens and just shred that up yourself, and then you just throw it in there, and then you're good to go. That's one thing I like to do when we're in a hurry. Those rotisserie chickens are nice, but they do have some added levels of sodium and fat and stuff in them. So if you're keeping an eye on that, just look at what you're buying. All right, so I threw the lid on top of this because it's just going to help hold in that heat and that steam, and all my moisture is not going to cook off super fast, and it'll help it cook a little bit quicker too. And then what we're going to do here is we've got our little bowl of cilantro that we chopped up, and then we've got our 2 limes. You really only need 1 lime. I grabbed an extra one just in case. But what we're going to do is kind of feel it, and if it's really firm, you can just kind of roll it back and forth on your cutting board. And you'll kind of see those oils seeping out of the skin, which is what you're looking for. That's how you know the juice on the inside is getting released, and it'll be a lot easier to just squeeze with your hand than you don't need a juicer or anything. You can just kind of squeeze it like this, whatever you want to do. It's a nice little stress ball. Grab a fresh knife here. Perfect. So I'm going to take one of these and just cut it in half. We'll take our little bowl of cilantro, and we can just squeeze that lime juice right into the cilantro. And the reason I like to do this is because the acid in the lime juice will help the cilantro from oxidizing or turning like black and brown and wilty. The same thing kind of goes with like guacamole. If you're cutting up avocados and they start to get brown from sitting on the counter for a couple minutes, you can mix in some lime juice or lemon juice or vinegar, and that acidity will help stop the oxidizing, so it won't change color. And if you want a real nice bright green colored guacamole, but you're making it the day before, lime juice is perfect. And I would normally zest these too, but I can't find a zester in my in-laws' many drawers and cupboards. So I'm just going to roll with the juice, but I definitely recommend zesting if you have one of those. And if you don't have a zester, you can take like a steak knife and just kind of scrape gently the outside of it, but they were not looking good on limes at the grocery store. So these are all kind of boring on the outside. They don't have that real thick skin that I'm looking for. Peel, I suppose. There we go. So we got a nice bubbly steam going on here. That's what we're looking for. So at this point, I would say our chicken is probably nice and cooked. It won't take too long at all if we chop it up like that. But then we can take a little bit of this cilantro and lime juice mixture and just kind of mix it up a little bit. Get that lime juice all over in there. And then we'll save some of it for garnishing the top. And then the rest of it, we can just throw right in here. And you don't want to go overboard, maybe just like a little pinch. Cilantro can be pretty potent on its own, especially when you throw it in something like this with not a whole lot of other flavors to combat it, but it'll definitely add that nice freshness to it. Stir that up a little bit. All right, let's get some garbage out of here. So next, and I think this is just about the last thing, if I did everything right, we have a little bit of Greek yogurt. Don't get the strawberries and cream or sweet vanilla and honey. Just get plain non-fat Greek yogurt. You could also use sour cream if you wanted to, but I feel like Greek yogurt is just a little bit healthier and it has pretty much the same taste and texture as sour cream. So we're sitting at a nice rolling boil here, which is good. But now I think since our chicken is probably cooked by this point, we can turn it down just a little bit. It's looking pretty good. My favorite part, we're gonna do a little taste test. This kitchen is so big, there's a drawer everywhere, but I gotta walk like half a mile to get to it. My kitchen, it's just, everything's right here. That's good. I think I'm gonna add a little more of this lime juice just to give it a little more tang. So when it comes to stuff like this, the stuff that you're using for like the flavor aspect, I always usually buy a little more of it just in case I want to add a little more bite to it or whatever it is. Plus the lime juice isn't gonna hurt the diet too much as long as you don't go overboard. And so I just like to get in there with my thumb and kind of pinch. You can feel like the little chunks of fruit that are left in there that are holding all the juice. And give those a good squeeze. So then what we'll do, turn the heat down a little bit. Let's give it another taste real quick. There we go. Now it's got that little limey kick to it, which is good. And it's not too hot, but you can definitely taste everything in there. So we're just going to take our Greek yogurt, and if you want to, you can leave this part out of it and just keep your chili as is, especially if there's like dairy-free people that you're trying to feed or whatever. And then people can add it to their own liking, but for this scenario, I'm just going to put it all in there to give it that good creamy texture. I also like to do it while it's still cooking. That way it can cook out any extra moisture. Just give that a good stir. There we go. And that will turn your little pot of soup here into a nice chili. And we'll just stir that up, kind of break up those big chunks of yogurt. There we go. Perfect. Now we'll give her one last little taste here. And that yogurt's going to have a little bit of a tang to it as well. But that's what I look for in like a white chili. I think more cilantro lime than I do like hot 5-alarm chili. I think I like that nice tanginess. So we'll take a little scoop here. There we go. So now we're ready. We got our bowl. Here comes the baby. All right, so we've got a nice little bowl of chili here. Take some of the cilantro and lime juice, and we'll just sprinkle that on top. All right, so now here we have our nice little bowl of white chicken chili.